Welcome to Community Radio Networks. It's Friday, the 26th of April. And we here have all the information that you need to take on the day today. We will start with the world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. The U.S. military has started helping to build a temporary harbor off the coast of the Gaza Strip to bring food, water and medicine to the territory. U.S. ships are involved, according to the Pentagon. In the meantime, work is continuing with the international community to bring aid supplies to the Gaza Strip via other routes also. It is the leaders of the U.S., Britain, France, and more than a dozen other countries that have called for Hamas to release the scores of hostages it is holding in a joint statement. A top Hamas political official told the Associated Press the Islamic militant group is willing to agree to a truce of 5 years or more with Israel, and that it would lay down its weapons and convert it into a political party if an independent Palestinian state is established along pre-1967 borders. These comments by Khalil al-Hayya in an interview came amid a stalemate in months of talks for a ceasefire in Gaza. Between 80 to 100,000 Palestinians have crossed into Egypt from Gaza since the start of the war, triggered by Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. And Houthis claim to launch a successful attack on the Israeli ship MSC Darwin. The Yemeni rebels attacked the vessel with missiles and drones in the Gulf of Aden. Meanwhile, Yemeni armed forces also rained ballistic and cruise missiles on the Israeli port. The missiles were launched at Israeli targets in al-Rashrash, and another Israeli ship, the MSC Veracruz, was targeted with drones in the Indian Ocean. Soft, entitled, snowflakes, lazy, these are some of the characteristics about Gen Z. Gen Z include those born between 1997 and 2012, pushed in the media by older generations who've largely failed to connect with and understand what they are all about. But these disparaging words used to describe the generation are, in fact, baseless. These young individuals are anything but passive. To put it simply, this generation isn't waiting for change. They are demanding it. Over the past 6 months alone, they've orchestrated movements that have seen the shockwaves through the status quo, leaving elites squirming in discomfort. It's time to recognize their power, their passion, and their potential to reshape our world that has long been ruined by decades of complacency. French police have broken up a pro-Palestinian protest by dozens of university students in Paris. Students at the Paris Institute of Political Studies conducting sit-ins to protest the Israeli military offensive in Gaza. And pro-Palestinian activists at the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom have announced that they have taken over the piazza and formed an encampment out there. As the university continues to reject their demands to cut ties with genocide, we rise up in unison with fellow students all over the world, they said, from Columbia, New York to Paris to Sydney. Columbia University late last night retracted its ultimatum for pro-Palestinian demonstrators to vacate their encampment, signaling a potential breakthrough in negotiations amidst escalating tensions on campuses across the United States. Protest encampments in place in more than 40 college campuses across the U.S. and in Canada, including UCLA, Northwestern, George Washington, Harvard, Brown, UT Austin, and the University of Michigan, as well as MIT. The University of Southern California, where 93 people were arrested, announced that it was canceling its main graduation commencement ceremony on the 10th of May. Columbia University engaged in an ongoing discussion with student protesters and demonstrators waving Israeli flags gathered outside Columbia University and called for those taken hostage on the 7th of October to be brought home. The University of Southern California is canceling its main graduation ceremony, and dozens more college students arrested at other campuses nationwide. At the City College of New York, hundreds of students who were gathered on the lawn beneath the Harlem campus famed Gothic buildings erupted in cheers after a small contingent of police officers retreated from the scene. USC, of course, has made that biggest decision of cancelling their graduation ceremony, which was to be on the 10th of May. And at the Emerson College of Boston, 108 people were arrested overnight at an alleyway encampment. The University of Texas at Austin campus, much calmer after 55 people were arrested, 26 of whom had no affiliation with the university. And this gathering of students and some faculty yesterday protested both the war as well as the arrests. And at the Emory University in Atlanta, local and state police swept in to dismantle a camp out there. Many colleges, including Harvard University, choosing not to take immediate action against protesters who had set up tents, even though they were openly defying the campus rules. And some colleges making new rules, like Northwestern University, which hastily changed its student code of conduct to bar the tents on its suburban Chicago campus. George Washington University said it would move its law school finals from a building next to the protest encampment to a new location because of the noise out there. And while former President Trump sat in his Manhattan criminal court for the 7th day yesterday in his hush money trial, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments regarding another criminal case against him and whether he's immune from criminal prosecution for actions he took as president. The Supreme Court's decision will determine whether 3 of his other criminal trials can proceed in Washington, D.C., Florida, and Georgia. When the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately rules on his claim of presidential immunity from prosecution, a third of those deciding the matter will be justices that he appointed to their lifetime posts. And those 3 are Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch. Posed questions from various angles of the nation's top judicial body there as they heard arguments yesterday in this case that provides a vital test of the power of the presidency. And they comprise half of the court's 6-3 conservative majority. The Supreme Court's majority appeared open to recognizing some level of immunity from federal prosecution for the official acts of former presidents as they weighed a blockbuster dispute that will be critical to the fate of former President Trump's 2020 election case in Washington, D.C. And a federal judge yesterday upheld the verdict and award in E. Jean Carroll's defamation case against former President Trump and denied his motion for a new trial. A New York's appeals court panel voted 4-3 to overturn the 2020 rape conviction of Hollywood executive Harvey Weinstein yesterday, ordering a new trial. The 72-year-old will be moved to a prison in California where he was separately convicted of sex crimes in 2022 and sentenced to 16 years. In 2017, he became the centerpiece of the global Me Too movement, which sought to expose the prevalence of sexual harassment. Edward Dwight was set to become America's first black astronaut in the 1960s, but was never granted that opportunity to fly to space. And now at age 90, that's all about to change. Dwight is a former U.S. Air Force test pilot and America's first African-American astronaut candidate, one of 6 people set to travel to the edge of space on Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket. Though he never made it to space, he's known as a pioneer for black astronauts who will be in space on this Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket. We do have also some of them and their names, as Dwight joins by 5 other space tourists when this 11-minute flight takes off on a yet-to-be-announced date. And those 5 others are Mason Angel, Sylvian Chiron, Kenneth Hess, Carol Schaller, and Gopi Totakura. Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry has officially resigned, and a new transitional council has been sworn in amid a period of escalating gang violence that has claimed over 1,500 lives so far this year in the Caribbean nation. It is the 9-member transitional council representing different political parties and civil and faith groups that is set up by Haitian leaders, a 15-member intergovernmental Caribbean organization and the U.S. Thousands of indigenous people marched yesterday in Brazil's capital, calling on the government to officially recognize lands they have lived on for centuries and to protect territories from criminal activities such as illegal mining. With posters bearing messages like "The future is indigenous," they walked towards 3 Power Square, where Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Planalto Presidential Palace are located in Brasilia, and a group of them entered the palace to talk to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, while others shouted towards the building, "Our rights are not negotiable." At least 155 people have died in floods and landslides in Tanzania following heavy rains caused by El Nino. About 200,000 people and more than 51,000 households already affected by this disaster. Special anti-terrorism measures being put in place to safeguard the unprecedented opening ceremony for the Paris Olympics on the River Seine will also apply to all buildings along the route, meaning people who work and live there and their guests will be subjected to background security checks. Those affected will be cross-checked against security services databases. Ukrainian President Zelensky has warned against a repeat of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster as the country marked the anniversary of the 1986 disaster at that power plant. And we'll talk more about it when we do our segment where we get you some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date. Greece has rejected pressure from European allies to help Ukraine boost its air defenses, arguing that Athens needs the systems for itself. Russian President Putin said he plans to visit China in May in what could become the first foreign trip for the Russian leader after he extended his rule by 6 more years in an election that offered voters little real choice. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's multi-day trip to China this week caps a particularly busy stretch of meetings between U.S. and Chinese officials. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was in Beijing earlier this month, where she delivered remarks about establishing a floor underneath the U.S.-China relationship and was photographed drinking a beer at a local brewery. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met today with Chinese President Xi Jinping and senior Chinese officials, stressing the importance of responsibly managing the differences between the U.S. and China as the two sides butted heads over a number of contentious bilateral, regional and global issues. The Chinese president told the U.S. diplomat that the world's 2 biggest economies should be partners and not rivals, but that there were a number of issues to be resolved in their relations. The Underwire World Anti-Doping Agency has said it would launch an independent review over its handling of a case that allowed 23 Chinese swimmers who tested positive for a banned substance to avoid punishment. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. The head of Vietnam's parliament has resigned, making him the latest senior member of government to leave office amid an ongoing anti-corruption campaign that's shaken the country's political and business elites. Muslim groups in Australia today criticised the disparity in the police response to 2 stabbing attacks in Sydney this month, saying it had created a perception of a double standard and further alienated the country's minority Muslim community. The Australian National Imams Council said an attack at a Bondi Junction shopping centre was quickly deemed a mental health issue, while the stabbing of a Christian bishop at a Sydney church 2 days later was classified as a terrorist act almost immediately. The voting for the second phase of the Lok Sabha elections in India is currently underway on 88 constituencies across 12 states and a union territory. The electrifying election campaign for the second phase ended at 5 p.m. with top leaders of the BJP-led NDA and the opposition India bloc using all their might to woo voters to their fold. 1,206 candidates from 12 states and union territories, along with 4 candidates from the outer Manipur parliamentary constituency, will contest elections in phase 2 of the Lok Sabha elections. And we do have the second phase commencing today with voters across these states and union territories casting their votes for 88 seats. The act of voting is not just a civic duty, but a powerful expression of collective will, as the world's largest democracy exercises its rights in the second phase of voting for the Lok Sabha elections. A new trend, though, has emerged. Major technology companies stepping into the civic arena and are urging millions of Indians to exercise their rights. Prime Minister Modi today said that the Supreme Court judgment on cross-verification of votes was a huge setback for opposition India bloc. He was addressing an election rally in Bihar, and the Prime Minister accused the opposition of sowing doubts about the reliability of the electronic voting machines. Telangana BJP witnessed a classic internal struggle caused by shifting power dynamics over a turncoat candidate. The BJP's Peddapalli unit saw a vertical split even after Prime Minister Modi introduced Gomasa Srinivas, a turncoat from Congress, to the public from the dais. Various church factions in Kerala today urged the people to go and vote for those supporting secularism and democracy in the general elections in the southern state. Voting commenced in all 20 Lok Sabha seats of the state this morning. And Pakistan's special representative on Afghanistan, Ambassador Asif Durrani, has said that the former has suffered more due to the latter's internal situation than its 3 wars with India in terms of blood spilt and finances drained. Ambassador Durrani was speaking at the one-day international conference, Pakistan in the Emerging Geopolitical Landscape, organized by the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad and the German Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. The U.S. State Department emphatically declared that there's absolutely no undercurrent of discord between the U.S. and Pakistan, despite recent sanctions imposed on companies allegedly supplying missile components to Islamabad. Scores of enthusiastic fans caught a glimpse of the ICC 2020 World Cup trophy, some clicking pictures with it as well, as it arrived on a 3-day tour of Pakistan as part of its world tour ahead of the cricketing extravaganza in the U.S. and the West Indies in June. Experienced all-rounder Jimmy Neesham kept his cool to defend 6 of the last ball to clinch a 4-run victory for New Zealand in the 4th 2020 international against Pakistan in Lahore. Pakistan also lost the 3rd match by 7 wickets after winning the 1st by the same margin. And the defeats are a jolt to a full-strength Pakistan side in their preparations for the 2020 World Cup to be held in the US and the West Indies in June. At last, common sense prevailed, with the 2 rival factions of the Pakistan Hockey Federation deciding to end the separate training camps of the national team, with an agreement reached that the players will attend the camp underway in Islamabad after the government brought them to the table. The first regular session of the Senate after its most recent election turned out to be hot and cold, where opposition and Treasury benches traded barbs but also agreed on working together to pull the country out of the economic quagmire. Aiming for a 50-50 ratio of men and women in the police force, Punjab Chief Minister Maryam Nawaz Sharif caused quite a stir yesterday when she arrived at a passing-out ceremony for women constables and traffic assistants decked out in a Punjab police uniform. Addressing the graduating class there at the Police Training College, Chung, the Chief Minister said she envisioned a time when women would constitute half the police force, adding that she had directed the Punjab Inspector General to increase the number of women police officers, who currently number around 7,000. An accountability court in Islamabad ordered former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his spouse Bushra Bibi to refrain from speaking against the establishment and the judiciary, and also asked the media not to highlight political or inflammatory statements made by the accused. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you this morning, but I do have lots of financial news, and that's coming up in just a minute. Stay with me right here on Community Radio Networks. Let's get you now your financial news for today. And today is the 26th of April as we get this Friday morning going. And we will start with the foreign currency exchange rates for you. First, we have the Indian rupee at 83.34, Pakistani rupee 278.37, Bangladeshi taka is 109.71, the Sri Lankan rupee at 295.84, Nepalese rupee 133.40, the British pound at 0.80, the euro at 0.93, the Canadian dollar 1.37, and the Australian dollar 1.53. Mexican peso 17.13, Chinese yuan 7.25, Japanese yen 156.92. Japanese officials rolling out further warnings on the yen after the currency slumped through that 155 mark against the dollar. It is right now at 156.92, leaving market players on edge ahead of a central bank meeting and U.S. economic data that may trigger further moves. The Russian ruble is at 91.58, Thai baht 36.97, and the Turkish lira at 32.45. 4 months into office, Argentine President Javier Milei has pulled off a critical feat in a country long ravaged by runaway inflation. He stabilized the currency. The peso has, in fact, not only stopped plunging day after day, but in one key foreign exchange market, there are many of them here, a byproduct of the country's web of Byzantine rules. It's actually rallying sharply, has soared 25% against the dollar over the past 3 months in the market known as blue chip swap that is used by many investors and companies. U.S. equity futures advanced as blockbuster earnings from Microsoft Corporation and Alphabet Inc. signal the artificial intelligence boom that has driven gains for technology stocks remains on track. Google owner Alphabet surged as much as 12% in pre-market trading, poised to add more than $230 billion to its market capitalization and exceeded the $2 trillion in valuation. And Microsoft rose 4%. It is U.S. stocks set to bounce back today as Alphabet and Microsoft earnings revived hopes for a big tech-led rally. But a key inflation report ahead could put a spoke in that wheel. S&P 500 futures have risen roughly 0.8%, while contracts on the tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 jumped 1%. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which includes a fewer tech stocks, were up 0.1%. Google and Microsoft rallying today as the technology bellwethers showed that hefty investments into artificial intelligence could reap more immediate revenue returns. A sharp contrast to Meta Platforms' view that AI is a long-term bet. Microsoft reporting this as continued growth in Microsoft's cloud business, fueled in part by the boom in AI, helped the software giant's top sales and earnings expectations for the latest quarter. Google parent Alphabet gained more than 11% in pre-market trading today, following standout quarterly results that beat revenue and earnings estimates and stoked investor excitement with the announcement of a cash dividend program of 20 cents per share, and the board of directors approved stock repurchases of up to an additional $70 billion. Our results in the first quarter reflect strong performances from search, YouTube, and cloud, said CEO Sundar Pichai in this statement. Microsoft Corporation and Google owner Alphabet Inc. sent a clear message to investors. Our spending on artificial intelligence and cloud computing is paying off, as Alphabet announced its first ever dividend, and that's $70 billion stock buyback, leading to the stock surge of nearly 16%. And this was done after the bell yesterday. Meta stock fell more than 10% after CEO Mark Zuckerberg revealed that the social media company is pouring more cash into its AI efforts, spooking investors. He tried to assuage investor concerns about the company's spending during his earnings call, noting that Meta has made similar moves when transitioning to other new technologies in the past. Intel announced its first quarter earnings results after the bell yesterday, beating analysts' expectations on the top and bottom lines. And former Tesla executive Drew Baglino has sold shares worth around $181.5 million in the world's top EV maker. He's a Tesla veteran who began his career as an engineer and was one of 4 members, along with Elon Musk, on the company's leadership team in 2006. After years of delays and dizzying array of setbacks during test flights, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft is finally set to make its inaugural crewed launch. The mission is on track to take off from Florida as soon as the 6th of May, carrying NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore to the International Space Station, marking what could be a historic and long-awaited victory for the beleaguered Starliner program. ExxonMobil Corporation missed analyst estimates within a 28% year-on-year drop in first quarter profits as weaker refining margins and lower natural gas prices offset volume gains in this news out of Houston. And oil giant Chevron Corporation beat estimates for first quarter profit today as higher production volumes in the U.S. helped offset a hit from weak natural gas prices and fuel margins. T. Rowe Price's first quarter profit beat expectations as an upswing in markets boosted its assets under management and softened the hit from outflows. Chipotle says its employees can choose chicken once again. Last week, the chain had asked its U.S. and Canadian employees to temporarily select another protein for their work meals to preserve the company's supply of chicken. The directive applied to both corporate staff and restaurant employees. Newport Beach, California-based Chipotle has more than 114,000 workers in the U.S. and Canada. Copper has hit a $10,000 a ton for the first time in 2 years as speculation builds that the world's mines will struggle to meet a coming wave of demand from green industries. The Federal Communications Commission voted yesterday to reinstate Obama-era net neutrality rules. The regulations treat internet service as a public utility like telecoms or water. As a result, the rules require broadband companies to treat all data equally without favoring or charging more for different websites. The pace of babies born each year in the U.S. has slowed to a new record level. And this was data by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Last year's slowdown marks an official end to the uptick in new babies that began during the COVID-19 pandemic. And after years of killing off brands, languishing with student loans and splurging on avocado toast instead of buying houses, millennials might finally be emerging on the top. A new report from the Center for American Progress, a left-leaning think tank, looked at how a wealth changed for different age cohorts from 2019 to 23. Over one-third of Americans, or about 130 million people, are living in areas with unhealthy levels of air pollution and are regularly breathing in unhealthy air, according to the American Lung Association's new State of the Air report. That's 11.7 million people breathing unhealthy air compared to last year's report. What do Billie Eilish, Dave Matthews, and Diplo have in common? As of yesterday, they are among more than 280 popular musicians who've signed a letter urging lawmakers to help reform the concert ticketing systems. New York City residents may soon see warning labels next to sugary foods and drinks in chain restaurants and coffee shops under a law set to go into effect later this year. And from its humble beginnings in California and its franchise locations in Illinois to its current status as one of the world's leading food service brands, McDonald's has come a long way. The Golden Arches are still America's favorite place to eat fast food under. And the chains that landed on the top 10 spots are McDonald's at number 1, Domino's at number 2, Chick-fil-A at 3, Taco Bell at 4, Pizza Hut at 5, Chipotle number 6, number 7, Subway number 8, Burger King number 9, Wendy's, and Texas Roadhouse on number 10. There are 36,000 McDonald's locations across the globe, including 14,300 here in the United States. McDonald's ranking number 1. In the second place, Domino's had an average of 15.8 million searches, and Chick-fil-A wasn't far behind with 15.4. According to federal data, the price of eggs is once again on the rise thanks to an outbreak of avian influenza in multiple states throughout the country. Average price for a dozen large-grade eggs was $2.99, up nearly 16% from its price in January. 9 million chickens in Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, and Texas have been confirmed to be affected by the strain of this bird flu in recent weeks. A small stake in the San Francisco Giants is for sale at a price that could value the team at about $4 billion. The Major League Baseball team is owned by around 30 partners, including former catcher Buster Posey and investor Arctus Sports Partners Charles B. Johnson, now who is 91 years old, a former chief executive officer of Franklin Templeton Investments, holding the largest stake at about a quarter. And the stake is less than 5% and related to estate planning. For a second straight year, Spirit Airlines appears to be aptly named as they rank dead last in a survey of airline passengers' satisfaction. The American Customer Satisfaction Index's annual travel study found Spirit once again bringing up the rear as one of just 2 airlines ranking below 70% in the survey. It is Spirit, and did manage a 3% improvement, and tying with Allegiant for the biggest leap forward over the 64% that they garnered in last year's poll. Southwest Airlines Company's stock has tumbled more than 9% after the airline posted a wider than expected first quarter loss in revenue that lagged the estimates. Flight attendants at Southwest Airlines have ratified a contract that includes pay raises totaling more than 33% over 4 years as airline workers continue to benefit from the industry's recovery since the pandemic. The Dallas Cowboys entered the NFL draft looking to acquire a true difference maker in their quest to make a Super Bowl run in 2024. And now that pick is official, with the Cowboys trading down 5 spots with the Detroit Lions and selecting Oklahoma Sooners tackle Tyler Guyton with the number 29 overall pick, the first round of that NFL draft. With plenty of top options, the Cowboys elected to move back and acquire additional draft capital, earning the number 29 and 73 picks and still landing their guy in Guyton. Texas Women's University is partnering with a nonprofit to build a preschool designed for the children of students. The school will be tuition-free and open to a mix of children of TWU students and families in Denton. Hospitality giant Marriott International has signed an agreement with NEOM to bring a new Ritz-Carlton Reserve to Trojena, a year-round mountain resort destination under development in northwestern Saudi Arabia. This marks the second Ritz-Carlton Reserve in Saudi Arabia for Marriott and the 7th collaboration overall between the company and NEOM. Chanel's chief executive officer defended the luxury brand's pricing after it raised the cost of one of its best-known handbags to more than $10,000 and $725. The fashion label, known for its haute couture designs and fragrances, takes account of inflation and its high standards for materials and craftsmanship in setting prices. Luxury brands like Chanel have made headlines in recent years for pushing up the prices of their often coveted goods. And this classic medium-sized Chanel flap bag, for instance, has risen above that 10,000 euro threshold for the first time in Paris last month. The fashion label out there with the craftsmanship in setting prices, and CEO Lena Nair talked about this increase in prices. Online fast fashion retailer Shein must face the European Union's strictest level of digital regulations as it added the company to its list of big platforms that need extra scrutiny. It is a very large online platform of Shein under the 27 Nation Bloc's Digital Services Act, a low-cost online retailer founded in China but now based in Singapore. Late spring overnight frosts in Germany's wine-growing regions have raised concerns among winemakers about potential impacts on the harvest. And coffee prices are expected to extend their meteoric surge, with the hoarding of beans and poor weather set to exacerbate a supply crunch in Vietnam, the world's biggest producer of the Robusta variety. ByteDance, the parent company for TikTok, would prefer shutting down the platform in the U.S. rather than sell it all off. Its legal options are exhausted, and the legislation passed to ban it still stands. The report of ByteDance's intentions for TikTok comes from Reuters, which cited 4 sources familiar with that matter. ByteDance, now the clock ticking on it. It'll need to decide by the 19th of January 2025, or otherwise see the platform blocked in the United States. Tata Electronics, a significant player in assembling enclosures for Apple iPhones in India, is now working on developing sophisticated and complex high-precision machines used to produce iPhone casings. And the company has partnered with 2 Indian manufacturers to develop these capabilities and plans to export these complex machines in the future, moving away from importing them from China. Nestle India posted a 27% year-on-year rise in net profit today. And come 2027, Indigo will mount non-stop flights by using its own wide-body aircrafts between India and far-flung corners of the world. The Rahul Bhatia-founded mega budget carrier said it has agreed to place a firm order for 30 twin-aisle Airbus A350-900, valued at over $9.5 billion at list price, along with an option for 70 more of these big birds. Ahmedabad to Amsterdam, Surat to Seoul, Patna to Paris, a day after ordering these 30 wide-body Airbus A350s with an option to order 70 more. Indigo CEO Peter Albers used these rhyming city pairs to give a glimpse of how founder Rahul Bhatia plans the airline's network to potentially evolve over the next few years. Market benchmark Sensex and Nifty wilted under selling pressure today after a 5-day rally as investors paired exposure to banking, financial and consumer durable stocks amid mixed trends in global markets. And Axis Bank overtook Kotak Mahindra Bank to become India's third most valued private lender after a rout in the latter stock. Kotak Bank's stock opened deep in the red yesterday, a day after the Reserve Bank of India restricted the lender from onboarding customers digitally and issuing credit cards, citing repeated failures to fix serious deficiencies. State Bank of India Life Insurance reported 4% rise in net profit. And Aditya Birla Group Chairman Kumar Mangalam Birla has said the 18,000 crore rupee fundraise has given Vodafone Idea a fresh lease of life and set the stage for a smart turnaround. Vegetable prices expected to remain high till June due to above normal temperatures, posing challenges for consumers across India. And the bustling city of Delhi is now home to the innovative International Celebrity Makeup Academy, a fresh and exciting venture powered by Studio 19 Films. This academy aims to transform talented individuals into celebrated makeup artists, all under the guidance of the accomplished leadership of Studio 19 Films founder Mr. Yash Ahlawat. The World Bank projects that global commodity prices will fall 3% this year, but the conflict in the Middle East could halt the inflationary decline. Amid supply chain challenges leading to the closure of refining units and storage constraints, the government in Pakistan has asked the Ministry of Interior and the Federal Board of Revenue to start immediate operations against oil smuggling with the support of other stakeholders. Bulls returned to the trading floor at the Pakistan Stock Exchange as the benchmark KSE 100 index climbed more than 400 points during intraday trade today. And March has emerged as the most beneficial month of the current financial year for the country as inflows from all sources increased, along with a 29% rise in receipts through Roshan digital accounts. That's all I have in the financial news. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the final segment of our program today coming up for you in just a minute. In this final segment of our program here today on Community Radio Networks, we will have your social calendar as well as some stories from the annals of history. Let us tell you about what's going on in town first. We have scattered storms here, which will be around today as well as tomorrow, but most of North Texas are going to stay dry. Even though it feels like it's going to rain, it's not really going to. The best storm chances will be in the first half of Sunday, when some storms may become severe. This is what it looks like right now. A big cluster of storms has just missed the Dallas-Fort Worth area to the north today. There could be a few scattered showers and storms, but most of the area is going to stay dry. It'll be cloudy, windy, and humid today with highs near 80 degrees. And a dry line surging towards North Texas today could produce a few isolated storms east of our area, and a few could form later tonight. Tomorrow will be mostly cloudy, very windy and muggy. Highs will reach 80 degrees once again, and there's that slight chance of a shower or storm during the afternoons and evenings hours, but mostly dry. Community Radio Networks would like to thank Discount Power for their support, as well as Houston EB5, the Aluwalia Law Offices, the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, Kinzer Law, Michaelachi, Ruchi Palace, Sri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flashbrush Productions for their support in bringing all this information to you. For those of you who would like to learn Indian classical vocal lessons, the Shruti Sangeet Academy can be contacted. I'll give you the number, 612-562-4432. By certified classical vocalist and talk show host Shanta Mishra, you can explore the soul of Indian music. They offer comprehensive curriculums with personalized instructions and an immersion in bhajan, shlokas, and folk music. They have private as well as group lessons on weekends in East Plano, where you can learn classical ragas, master vocal techniques, embrace rhythm and tal, experience Indian culture like never before. Shanta Mishra 10 at gmail.com is her email if you would like to contact her for these classes. Color Me Safe Foundation is a family crisis management organization serving the greater Dallas area, and they've launched 2 new educational initiatives. Ask Auntie is one of them, and Sati Support Group is the other. Through discussions on topics such as generational and cultural gaps, cultural identity, mental health, bullying, and many more, these programs seek to empower South Asian children and families with the tools and understanding to overcome these shared challenges in a very supportive and non-judgmental space. ColorMeSafeFoundation.org. Early voting continues, and you all do know that Election Day is on Saturday, the 4th of May, not this Saturday, but the next. And EarthX 2024 continues at the Hilton Anatole. Today is the last day, day 5, and wildlife conservation is the topic today. You can debate how to stop forest fires, whether to reintroduce wolves and create working lands for wildlife, learn about the $3 trillion a year eye trafficking industry, engaging ocean champions, scientists, political figures, and global finance leaders seeking to grow a sustainable blue economy. Today, there will also be an NGO public forum, and this complimentary event will feature leaders of wildlife conservation associations discussing their history and current impact on wildlife and habitat. Going on at the Hilton Anatole, it is the Congress of Conferences, EarthX 2024. This evening, there is an event happening, Jeet Ka Safar, with AMAX in association with the National Cricket League. And they will have the champions, the 2009 T20 World Cup cricket team here in Dallas today. And to get more information to attend this event, please call Andy Lalani. His number is 817-883-3333. 817-883-3333. Umrao Jan is showing today, one show today and one show tomorrow. This musical play based on the novel written by Mirza Hadi Rusma. Neetu Chandra is playing the role of Umrao Jan in this musical play in the Broadway style at the Dallas Music Hall. And it is going to be tonight at 8:30 and tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Umrao John. And you can get your tickets at ticketmaster.com. They will also be available at the door. The Festival of Joy is happening tomorrow from 11 to 9 at the Clyde Warren Park in downtown Dallas. You can get more information at festivalofjoydallas.com. There'll be a Rath Yatra parade, an evening concert at 7 o'clock, and a vegetarian street food that will be available, along with kirtan, yoga, and meditation. There'll be a free vegan feast and children's activities, henna, face painting, plenty more. You can experience the bhakti traditions of ancient India at the Festival of Joy, and that is tomorrow from 11 to 9 at the Clyde Warren Park. And we are thrilled to invite you to the launch of Yoga for Unity in Texas, and that is happening also tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the Radhakrishna Temple in Allen. Yoga for Unity fosters collaboration among authentic yoga institutions to raise awareness of yoga resources and teachers. And the launch event is at 4 o'clock tomorrow, recognizing collaborating organizations and leaders, followed by a 20 to 30-minute demonstration session of asana, pranayam, and dhyana. All this happening at the Radhakrishna Temple in Allen. The Dallas Indian Lions Club are having the annual Festival of India on Sunday. The Dallas Indian Lions Club quarterly inviting you to the 39th annual celebration in Plano this Sunday. And for the first time in American television history, PBS stations across the U.S. will show a new documentary film on Swami Vivekananda called America's First Guru, and that too a first by an Indian origin documentary filmmaker. And that will be in the month of May. DFW Gujarati Samaj is presenting a non-stop comedy drama with renowned artist Sri Sanjay Goradia on the 5th of May at 5 o'clock at the McKinney North High School. And there will be light refreshments which will be available for purchase. You need to get your tickets for this non-stop comedy drama with renowned artist Sri Sanjay Goradia happening on the 5th of May at 5 o'clock at the McKinney North High School, and more information is available at the DFW Gujarati Samaj website. Hassan Sumro, in association with the Sheesh Eatery and Lounge, is presenting Moms and Momos. It is a fun-filled contest hosted by Hina Dilpazir Khan, happening on the 9th of May. It has various contest categories there at the Sheesh Eatery and Lounge. So inviting you all to be there on the 9th of May at 7:30. Indian Idol's Intense Tour is happening on Friday, the 10th of May at the Grand Center. And an evening of ghazals and geets by Radhika Chopra at the Plaza Theatre in Garland on Saturday, the 11th of May at 6 o'clock in the evening. Radhika Chopra will be live to perform in front of you out there. And for more information, you can call 408-412-1238. 408-412-1238. Unforgettable 90s, Kumar Sanu and Sadhana Sargam live in concert on the 12th of May at the Credit Union of Texas Event Center on Bethany Drive in Allen. And your tickets are available at 360shows.com or at Ticketmaster. Junoon performing on the 19th of May at the Raleigh Underground, and the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce are having their AI Con 2024, incorporating new tech and AI. And the morning keynote speaker is Chakri Gautamakulla, the CEO and co-founder of O9 Solutions. And in the afternoon, George Baker Sr., the founder and chairman of Park Hub, will be the speaker. 23rd of May from 9:30 to 2:30 at the Renaissance Hotel Addison. And there will be panel discussions out there also. You can get more information and register at usicoc.org. Taste of the Cowboys happening the 20th anniversary of the Taste of the Cowboys on the 7th of June at the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco. And a two-day holistic festival of life and wellness happening on the 8th and 9th of June at the Plano Nature and Retreat Center, brought to you by Mystic Mandala. For more information, you can call Vijay at 972-750-14 Badshah's Pagal tour is happening at the Curtis Culwell Center on the 14th of June, and Shreya Ghoshal will be live at the Curtis Culwell Center on the 16th of June. Nan's Vision is presenting Dallas's Glamorous Night with Shilpa Shetty on the 29th of June. And as we get more information about the other events, we'll get it to you right here on Community Radio Networks. A busy community here for you in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And this is what everything looks like on this 26th day of April. Let's get you some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date. John Wilkes Booth is killed when Union soldiers track him down to a Virginia farm 12 days after he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. 26-year-old was one of the most famous actors in the country when he shot President Lincoln during a performance at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on the night of April the 14th. He was a Maryland native and a strong supporter of the Confederacy. And as the war entered its final stages, he hatched a conspiracy to kidnap the president, enlisted the aid of several associates, but the opportunity never presented itself. After the surrender of Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, he changed the plan to a simultaneous assassination of President Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Secretary of State William Seward. Only Lincoln was actually killed, however. Seward was stabbed by Lewis Payne, but survived, while the man assigned to kill Johnson did not carry out his assignment. So it was Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, who died on the 26th of April in 1865, when he was tracked down to a Virginia farm 12 days after he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. On the 26th of April in 1915, after receiving the promise of significant territorial gains, Italy signs the Treaty of London, committing itself to enter World War I on the side of the Allies. And that was this lots of allies signing this treaty. Italy was the first of them. During the Spanish Civil War, the German military tests its powerful new air force, the Luftwaffe, on the Basque town of Guernica in northern Spain. Although the independence-minded Basque region opposed General Francisco Franco's nationalist forces in the Spanish Civil War, Guernica itself was a small rural city of only 5,000 inhabitants that declared non-belligerence in that conflict. With Franco's approval, cutting-edge German aircrafts began their unprovoked attack, and the busiest hour of the market day in Guernica at 4:30 p.m. and for 3 hours the German planes poured down a continuous and unopposed rain of bombs and gunfire on the town and surrounding countryside. 1/3 of Guernica's 5,000 inhabitants were killed or wounded, and fires engulfed the city and burned for days. This indiscriminate killing of civilians there aroused world opinion and became a symbol of fascist brutality. Unfortunately, by 1942, all major participants in World War II had adopted the bombing innovations developed by the Nazis at Guernica, and by the war's end in 1945, millions of innocent civilians had perished under Allied and Axis air raids. But it was the Nazis testing their new air force, Luftwaffe, in the Basque town of Guernica on today's date in 1937. And in 1954, on the 26th of April, the Salk polio vaccine field trials were held, involving 1.8 million children, beginning at the Franklin Sherman Elementary School in McLean, Virginia. Children in the U.S., Canada, and Finland participated in these trials, which used for the first time the now standard double-blind method, whereby neither the patient nor attending doctor knew if the inoculation was the vaccine or a placebo. And a year later, researchers announced the vaccine was safe and effective, and it quickly became a standard part of childhood immunizations in America. In the ensuing decades, polio vaccines would all but wipe out that highly contagious disease in the Western Hemisphere. It was the polio vaccine trials that began on today's date in the year 1954. And it was Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president, who was diagnosed with polio in 1921 at the age of 39 and was left paralyzed from the waist down and forced to use leg braces, and a wheelchair for the rest of his life. In 1938, he helped found the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, later named the March of Dimes, and the organization responsible for funding much of the research concerning the disease, including this Salk vaccine. You know why it's called Salk? The man behind the original vaccine was New York-born physician and epidemiologist Jonas Salk, and his work on anti-influenza vaccines in the 40s while at the University of Michigan School of Public Health led him in 1952 to the University of Pittsburgh, where he developed the inactive polio vaccine based on a virus strain of the disease. And these field trials that followed, the largest in U.S. history at the time, were held by his former University of Michigan colleague, Dr. Thomas Francis Jr. on today's date in 1954. Today, ladies and gentlemen, polio has been eliminated throughout much of the world due to this vaccine. However, there is still no cure for the disease, and it persists in a small number of countries in Africa and Asia. That is why it is so important to get those polio immunizations for the kids. In an effort to resolve several problems in Asia, including the war between the French and Vietnamese nationalists in Indochina, representatives from the world's powers meet in Geneva on today's date in 1954. The conference there marking a turning point in the U.S.'s involvement in Vietnam. These representatives from the U.S., the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, France, and Great Britain came together to try to resolve several problems related to Asia, and one of the most troubling concerns was the long and bloody battle between Vietnamese nationalist forces under the leadership of the communist Ho Chi Minh and the French, who were intent on continuing colonial control over Vietnam. And so this conference was held in Geneva on today's date in 1954. And in 1977, on today's date, the legendary discotheque Studio 54 opens its doors for the very first time. It would soon become the global epicenter of the disco craze and the most famous nightclub in the world. The impresarios behind Studio 54 were Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager, college roommates at Syracuse University, who got into the nightclub business after their first venture. A chain of steak restaurants failed to flourish, but before taking Manhattan by storm and becoming famous for openly and shamelessly excluding all but the most chic, famous, or beautiful patrons from their establishment, they were running a far less pretentious operation called the Enchanted Garden in the far reaches of Queens. And the woman who deserved the lion's share of this credit for making 54 into the celebrity playground that it became was Carmen de Alessio, a public relations entrepreneur in the fashion industry, whose Rolodex included names like Bianca Jagger, Liza Minnelli, Andy Warhol, and Truman Capote. Her buzz-building turned the grand opening into a major item in the New York gossip columns, and her later efforts, like having Bianca Jagger pose atop a white horse at a 30th birthday party, stoked the public's fascination with Studio 54 even more. Not just the usual celebrity suspects, actors, models, musicians, and athletes, but also political figures like Margaret Trudeau, Jackie Onassis, and infamously White House Chief of Staff Hamilton Jordan came out to be seen during the club's brief heyday. It was Studio 54 that opened in New York City on April the 26th in 1977. And in 1983, the Soviet Union released a letter that Russian leader Yuri Andropov wrote to Samantha Smith, an American fifth grader from Manchester in Maine, inviting her to visit his country. Andropov's letter came in response to a note that she had written and sent him in December the year before, asking if the Soviets were planning to start a nuclear war. At the time, the U.S. and Soviet Union were Cold War enemies. President Reagan, a passionate anti-communist, had dubbed the Soviet Union the evil empire and called for massive increases in U.S. defense spending to meet the perceived Soviet threat. And in his public relations duel with Reagan, known as the Great Communicator, Andropov, who had succeeded longtime Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev in 1982, assumed a folksy, almost grandfatherly approach that was incongruous with the negative image most Americans had of the Soviet. And that letter said that Russian people wanted to live in peace, to trade and cooperate with all the neighbors on the globe, no matter how close or far away they are, and certainly with such a great country as the United States of America. In response to Samantha Smith's question about whether they wish to prevent nuclear war, he declared, "Yes, Samantha, we in the Soviet Union are endeavoring and doing everything so that there will be no war between our two countries, so that there will be no war at all on Earth." Andropov also complimented Smith, comparing her to the spunky character Becky Thatcher from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. It was in February of 1984, the year later, that Yuri Andropov died from kidney failure and was succeeded by Konstantin Chernenko. And the invitation was for Samantha Smith to fly there, and she accepted that invitation and flew to the Soviet Union with her parents for this visit, and afterwards she became an international celebrity and peace ambassador, making speeches, writing a book, and even landing a role on an American television series. But when Yuri Andropov died from kidney failure and was succeeded there the following year, in August 1985, Samantha Smith died in a plane crash. She was only 13 years old. On the 26th of April in 1984, President Ronald Reagan arrives in China for a diplomatic meeting with Chinese President Li Xindian. The trip marked the third time a U.S. president had traveled to China since President Richard Nixon's historic trip in 1972. And then Gerald Ford had visited in 1975. It was Ronald Reagan in 1984. On today's date, First Lady Nancy Reagan accompanied her husband to China, along with approximately 600 journalists, a slew of Secret Service agents, and according to BBC reports, officials who guard the codes for launching nuclear missiles. The Reagans toured historical and cultural sites in Beijing and attended a dinner in their honor that was hosted by the Chinese president. And during his visit, President Reagan impressed reporters and dignitaries with his occasional attempts to speak Chinese. However, the trip failed to break through that deadlock between China and the U.S. over the issue of Taiwanese independence. Still exists even today. And this story that I just related happened on today's date in 1984. And then in 1986, almost a decade after meeting at a celebrity tennis tournament, television news reporter Maria Shriver marries movie actor and former bodybuilder Arnold Schwarzenegger. Politically, it seemed an unlikely match. Shriver, then a co-anchor for the CBS Morning News in New York City, was a Democrat and a member of one of the most prominent political families of the country. Her mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, was the sister of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. And while her father, Sergeant Shriver, had been the Democratic nominee for vice president, Schwarzenegger, born in Austria, came to the U.S. and became an American citizen in 1983. Soon after that, he began actively campaigning on behalf of Republican candidates. He would later be named chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports by President George H.W. Bush. And they were married in the St. Francis Xavier Church on today's date in 1986 in Massachusetts before some 500 guests, and the bride's cousin Carolyn Kennedy was the maid of honor, and the former Mr. Universe Franco Colombo served as best man. The reception was held at the Kennedy compound in nearby Hannesport. And in the fall of 2003, Schwarzenegger was elected governor of California in a special recall election over the Democratic incumbent Gray Davis. At that time, Shriver was a news correspondent for NBC and a frequent contributor to the network's Dateline program. In February 2004, she announced she was leaving the network due to the competing interests of her work as California's First Lady. And in 2007, she announced she would not be returning to TV news at all. She reportedly played an important behind-the-scenes role in her husband's campaign and administration, helping him gain the support of California's electorate. Shriver and Schwarzenegger have 4 children, and in 2011, following the disclosure that Schwarzenegger had a love child with the family housekeeper, he and Shriver announced they were separating after 25 years of marriage. And in another final story here, ladies and gentlemen, that happened on today's date, it was in 1986. And we did mention this when we did the world news today. It was the world's worst nuclear power plant accident that occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union. 32 people died and dozens more suffered radiation burns in the opening days of the crisis. But only after Swedish authorities reported the fallout did Soviet authorities reluctantly admit that an accident had occurred. The Chernobyl station was situated at the settlement of Pripyat, about 65 miles north of Kyiv in the Ukraine. But in the late 1970s, on the banks of this river, Chernobyl had 4 reactors, each capable of producing 1,000 megawatts of electric power. On the evening of the 25th of April, a group of engineers began an electrical engineering experiment on the number 4 reactor. The engineers, who had little knowledge of reactor physics, wanted to see if the reactor's turbine could run emergency water pumps on inertial power. As part of this poorly designed experiment, the engineers disconnected the reactor's emergency safety systems and its power regulating system. Next, they compounded this recklessness with a series of mistakes. And they ran the reactor at a power level so low that the reaction became unstable, and then removed too many of the reactor's control rods in an attempt to power it up again. The reactor's output rose to more than 200 megawatts, but was proving increasingly difficult to control. And at 1:23 a.m. on the 26th of April, the engineers continued with the experiment and shut down the turbine generator to see if its inertial spinning would power the reactor's water pumps. In fact, it did not adequately power the water pumps, and without cooling water, the power level in the reactor surged. To prevent the meltdown, the operators reinserted all the 200-some control rods into the reactor at once. So before these rods, the 5 meters of absorbent material could penetrate the core, 200 graphite tips simultaneously entered. And in this explosion that happened and the ensuing fire, more than 50 tons of radioactive material were released into the atmosphere, where it was carried by air currents. And it is on today's date that the Chernobyl disaster happened, a nuclear disaster that has become one of the worst in the world ever, happened on today's date in 1986. And in the opening days, of course, they mentioned only that 32 people had died and dozens more suffered radiation and burns. Now, the radiation that escaped into the atmosphere, which was several times that produced by the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was spread by the wind over northern and eastern Europe, contaminating millions of acres of forest and farmland. An estimated 5,000 Soviet citizens eventually died from cancer and other radiation-induced illnesses caused by the exposure to the Chernobyl radiation, and millions more had their health adversely affected. In the year 2000, the last working reactors of Chernobyl were shut down, and the plant has been officially closed. That, ladies and gentlemen, was some of the stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, and that also is my show for today. It is Friday, the 26th of April. Have a wonderful weekend, and I do hope you enjoyed the show. For those of you who'd like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754.